So as I was saying, special day, special episode, special guest. We have the founder of Growth Stack Media, who is also the producer of this wonderful podcast, Badasses in Tech, who also is my husband and business partner and partner in life, Jordan Mitchell. How the heck are you?
I'm doing great and try to fit all that on a business card. But yeah, I mean, like you said, things are a little bit different today. I know we wanted to switch it up, give people a little bit more of a look behind the scenes, because usually you're doing your own thing, solo episodes, or interviewing different tech founders and tech professionals. So there's just been a lot going on with the podcast and the business.
Yeah.
So it just seemed like a really good time to do a special episode and hoping to do more of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're spot on. You know, even though we are comms professionals, we are in the tech industry. I mean, not only are we helping tech companies grow and establish themselves, but this is a piece of technology. We're putting together podcasts, so I would consider us experts in tech, badasses in tech.
Well, I think what you're getting at is super interesting, and I think this lends itself nicely to like why we started the podcast, but it all goes back to the storytelling aspects of things, and coming from the PR background that we were in and working with the agencies that we were at, we were getting exposure to C-level executives very early on in our career, and we were able to be a part of conversations internally that ended up having a lot of impact down the road, and that also were jam-packed with great insights and tips and, you know, how to optimize yourself as a top performer or a leader.
Yeah.
And, you know, I remember we would always talk about it after and be like, you know, we feel lucky that we just got to hear that, but it's not going anywhere until it turns into a story or whatever. And how cool would it be to bring these types of insights to a broader audience?
Absolutely.
So that's where the storytelling kind of lends itself nicely to not only the industry we're in from a technology perspective, but how we're using technology, not only to produce the episode remotely on location, but yeah, just like how to partner and use everyone's skill sets to get the best result.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, and I know we have some time reserved later to talk a little bit about just how tech like AI, for example, is impacting comms and impacting the work that we do. So yeah, you touched on a lot, but I want to just kind of tease out some of the things. You're absolutely right. So we don't want to gatekeep. Like we did not want to gatekeep all of the learnings, all of the lessons, both from a just general, you know, if we were talking to an expert in the advertising industry, or if we were talking to, like you mentioned, a CEO of a developer company, like we're getting those very tactical, industry-specific advice, tips, and tricks. But we were also getting some of the professional development and some of the career advice from you and I being those account coordinators on those agency teams, really young in our careers. Like you said, you know, the nerve of us to get on the phone and kind of talk through, ask these very successful, high profile executives questions. We were learning so much. And I think that was what you said. Like we just didn't want to gatekeep. And yeah, should we talk a little bit about kind of our early stage? Because you're making me remember, and like I'm actually sweating thinking about how
I'm definitely sweating.
How nerve-wracking all that was.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and I'll turn it over to you a little bit to just maybe tease up, you know, how did we get started? How did we get started working together in agency life? And kind of, do you remember those early days of our friendship?
Okay, well, I'd preface this that if we were prepping like a CEO to go in on a media briefing, like they don't want to hear your whole life story, but I think we do need to start a little bit further back.
Yeah, you were showing behind the curtain.
We were, what I dare say, best friends at East Carolina University. They're from 2011 to 2015, both School of Communication students, both trying to be very high achievers and get as involved as possible on campus. Both in getting into journalism, I think was really instrumental for both of us. You were an editor at East Carolinian. I ended up doing an internship at the CBS affiliate, WNCT, and cut my chops as a production assistant while I was working there as an intern, but being able to see all the behind the scenes of what goes into doing the live news every day. And just that was our kind of the first foray into the PR side of things, because you're actually receiving pitches on that end. So it was just really interesting to see how storytelling kind of comes together through all these different mediums. And, our paths took us out to California, reconnected. You ended up helping getting me a opportunity at Hotwire Global Communication. I was coming from a video production background, working as a PA in LA on music videos and commercials, and transparently wanted a little bit of more stability. I was having to work multiple other jobs, and Hotwire seemed like like an actual, like, real salaried career path. And when I say real, I just mean like when you're working freelance production, it's not 9 to 5. It's like you're getting a day rate. So you're always working not only your hardest on set, but you're trying to be really scrappy with your networking, because those are the people that are bringing you in on other jobs and stuff. So it's been quite a windy road.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure, you're saying a lot of really interesting things. So you've always had this passion and this interest in video.
Yes.
And I remember just during our time at ECU, there were opportunities, for example, for like the traditional PR students or the traditional journalism students to go and study abroad in London. And you, even at such a young age, from my memory, carved your opportunities for yourself. You leaned into your skill with video, and you kind of pitched to the director there of the study abroad program, like, hey, you don't have this for video students, but video is going to be hot, and it's going to be a medium that should be included in journalism. So give me a shot to go, right?
I think that's actually a really cool story, because as you're mentioning the School of Communication, and a little bit, before we started rolling, we were talking about how different parts of universities, sometimes those individual schools aren't communicating together. And that was an example of that. So in the School of Communication, we didn't necessarily have easy access to equipment. There was actually pirate media, and then the film students that were their own dedicated, things that they had going on. But I did find out through talking to different professors that if you got a professor to essentially sponsor you by saying like, hey, Jordan needs this for a project or something, then you could go and actually rent either from like the journalism department or whatever. So that was the barrier to even get access to a camera at first. I want to actually emphasize that too. There used to be such a higher barrier to entry for media just in general. It's a really interesting place that we're at now. But going back to what you're saying about that study abroad trip, that was really pivotal. I really wanted to go to London, and I didn't have the prerequisites for one of the classes. And so I figured, hey, I went to the dean at the time, and I said, hey, I don't have the prerequisites for this class, but in place of that class, why don't you let me produce a video for the program? And they ended up going with it.
Hey everyone, hope you're enjoying the episode so far. If you haven't already, click follow or subscribe on the platform you're tuning into so that you won't miss a second of Badasses in Tech. You can also help us out by leaving a 5-star review. Thanks again. Now back to the show. I think that's important for our listeners who maybe they're getting doors shut in their face left and right, and it's like, don't let that discourage you. Or maybe there isn't an opportunity that's completely spelled out for you as the individual, but don't be afraid to, what's your mom always say? Don't be afraid to ask, so you will GET.
Yep.
Shout out to Mama G for that one.
Yep.
So
my mom does say that.
But I think it's so important, and it's a great reminder that here you are. I know we're we're bouncing around and we're kind of starting from the origin, but here you are. You're running your own company. You're working for yourself, and as we're reflecting on our journey, you created all of these opportunities for yourself along the way. That where would you be? What would happen if you just kind of went with the status quo, or I'm not a student that's qualified for this particular thing, so I'm just not going to do it. Like,
Yeah.
you've always had that streak, that grit, that drive. And I think that's something really important for our listeners to
Yeah.
be reminded of as well. Again, kind of bouncing back to our early agency days, it was very difficult, right? Like and what you were talking about, having to do the different jobs,
Mm.
right? Like, you were afraid to roll up your sleeves, have to work 3 or 4 jobs. Because when you're starting out, that's kind of how it is these days. Like,
Yeah.
it is not, as far as my experience, and I think your experience, you have to work. You have to work for it, and you can't
Yep.
be afraid. And do you have any kind of
Absolutely.
pivotal memories there?
So many
Yeah.
things I could hop in on. The first thing I want to go back to is we were talking about doors slamming in your face. That is going to happen so many times. It's going to happen more times than not. And I've actually found that most times you have to do a significant higher volume of work and effort in a particular area to just get the outcome that you want. Sometimes people get lucky and it's like a one and done type thing, but you have to be willing to do a few things. First of all, just defining your vision, but being open to the different paths to get there and being adaptable. And if COVID's shown us anything in particular, it's that everything we thought about the way the world works, and even the video production industry is recovering still from COVID. It's pretty bad still. That you have to be ready to have the marbles spilled on the table and start again. And I think that's where developing technical skill sets and doing what you can do with what you have at that moment is so important, and just not giving up. And for me, like we said, the example of like, cool, I wasn't going to be able to go on that trip. So I was like, what is the other way? What can I do? What value can I put forward? Now we're at a point where we're lucky to have access to gear, or, have our own and be building that over time. But before that, what could you do? You could work on your storytelling skills. You could work on your interviewing skills, identifying good sound bites, video editing. It's like, don't wait for people to give you opportunities. I think that you just need to go out there and start doing, and again, take the long term view.
Yeah.
And not get discouraged, because you, like I was saying at the beginning, you were saying, you will have doors slammed in your face. That's part of it. There's a lot of rejection.
Yeah, and kind of getting comfortable with it, getting comfortable with working extra hard, like you said. As you were talking, I was thinking about a similar program or kind of opportunity that you created for yourself in our agency life. You were advocating for yourself, I think, is like what I'm trying to say, right? You're like, hey, we're traditional PR, or I think maybe at the time they were digital PR or something along those lines. And every conversation you're like, but have we thought about where video could have a play in this?
Yeah.
Like, what about video? And you know the story best, but I remember there was kind of a opportunity where our boss at the time gave you the opportunity, but you still had to do our client work. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And I do want to clarify, because they were doing some video, and they had just started their digital branding lab arm, and they were a global organization. So they did have some video projects going out, but to be fair, it wasn't a huge formalized function of the business.
It was still new, I feel like.
I came into PR formally at a very interesting time with a video production background. The time that I came in was that PR was still very editorial focused. And coming from that news background, the video production background, I saw where the ball was going.
Right.
And another aspect at that time is that, sure, there were brands doing cool branded content, but it was mainly consumer brands or Fortune 500 brands that had a significant budget to put towards something like that. Or the companies that maybe weren't in that field, but were still doing some like talking head stuff that was just kind of stale, boring content. And, I was coming off from entertainment, doing music video commercials, RCA Records, music video, Beats by Dre. So like Nike, like working on really cool consumer like entertainment brands. And I just saw such a big opportunity to make the exciting, unique stories we're telling about software and different technology, make it as cool creatively.
Yeah.
Kind of bringing that like entertainment, like creative eye to it, and switching things up. But from a medium standpoint, there was no provable ROI yet because the company hadn't ventured out into it formally. So in order to circumvent that, outside of probably annoying my managers a lot because I was bringing up video every opportunity I could and saying that I would just produce it, I want to call out Barbara Bates, who was the CEO at the time, who hired me. And she kind of pulled me aside one day and told me, look, like, I will let you start doing more video, but you need to be an absolute killer in the position that I hired you to do, which was entry-level PR work, which involved a lot of media relations and other aspects of things. But what that did was give me an opportunity. And I think that having that motivation to do the more video turned me into a better PR professional.
A shark. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to just emphasize another important part of what we're talking about for those who may be trying to up-level themselves in their career, or maybe there's listeners that are trying to break into their career. It is so important, especially now, post-COVID, that you figure out a way to have FaceTime, build rapport, really leaning into those interpersonal, like, communication skills that we hear all the time kind of got lost in the shuffle of COVID. We woke up, we were the first ones in the office. I mean, you remember how many Caltrains and BART stations, like 2 or 3 different things. We did not care. We knew that this is an important job if we do it well now in our early 20s and grind, like it's only going to continue to get better.
You're bringing up a good point, and I think that, again, this was like pre-COVID, so being in person, I think, was the complete catalyst for our trajectory and moving to a major city at the time.
And not being afraid to build the rapport with the CEO. Like, I'm sure, I mean, I was scared. It was my first day, and there was clearly some sort of lunch and learn series that they were doing in one of the conference rooms. And I found a comfy seat in the way back of the room. And Barbara was like, come up here, like, come to the table, sit down, you're part of this, like, participate.
Yeah.
And she did it in such a friendly, caring, but like direct way that it stuck with me. And so from that moment on, I knew people are looking at me. Like, people are wanting me to provide value, like you're saying, whether it's filling a space in an empty chair, which we've learned over our career that sometimes that is valuable, just being a body in a room, or showing up as strong as you can on a client call or when you're meeting somebody new. And of course you're going to be nervous, like, like we're saying, like, but trying to push that aside and knowing you're there for a reason. You are an expert.
Yeah.
In whatever you are the expert, whether it's video, whether it's cooking, whether it's yoga, whether it's music, whatever it is. Like, we all have talents and stories to tell. So yeah, I just think, I think that's just so important, and I just want to encourage that.
Yeah, I think that all sounds great. I think that you have so much knowledge around like business communication and the interpersonal aspects of things. So I know some of our listeners are like recent graduates, or maybe they're early on in their career, are looking to up-level their career, get promoted faster. So for those listening that maybe don't have the same level of communication ability that you do, like, what advice would you give them? Like, what are some tips when it comes to client services or, just showing up well at work?
It might be because I just love PR, but I think about literally being your own PR person. Making sure that whatever you're doing, whether it's in a college class or a volunteer or something that you're doing for your job, making sure that you're writing it down somewhere, you're keeping track of it, and you're using it to show the value. So, for example, I bypassed a lot of unpaid internships. I was promoted quite quickly, very, very fast, multiple times. I don't think that I'm like the best in the world in the room, but I knew exactly what I needed to do. I knew how to package up my wins, my values.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? I don't mean to interrupt you. Like, how do you advocate for yourself with a manager when you're maybe a junior or mid-level employee?
I think at the end of the day, we want to make our team or our boss look as great as we can. So for me, what worked was being very transparent and open with those managers, those bosses, the skip levels, right? Like your boss's boss of what's stressing you out right now and how can I help? Making sure that what you're wanting is very, very clear. So, hey, manager, I know I just started, but I would love to get promoted in 6 months. Or, hey, I know that I'm really into video and this is a traditional PR, but like I want to run a video project in the next 6 months. Like, how can we work to do that together? And just continuing to every single chance you get, mapping all of your wins back. So, for example, I was very set on just getting promoted and getting as much money as I possibly can. I'm sure that has something to do with just kind of like my upbringing and how I had to, my relationship with money, right? So
Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
I have always wanted to not have to worry about picking and choosing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like but I also knew that I was never going to get anything handed to me. But I also want it, like I want everything that I want. I want a certain lifestyle, all of that. But I knew it was going to be hard work.
Yeah.
So when you kind of have that vision, like you said, when you have that vision in mind, I think maybe now that we're talking about it, I had maybe a specific like savings goal that I was wanting because I wanted to buy a house one day and all of those things. So just making sure that, okay, my manager was like, 6 months, getting a promotion, you just started, like, I don't know, that seems pretty lofty of a goal, but if you can blow out the media exposure of this upcoming conference.
Yeah.
Okay, what does that mean? Like that would be my question back. What do you mean blow out? Like what is your definition of success there?
Okay.
10 pieces of coverage, 20 pieces of coverage, one. So I think, as we're starting out, or even maybe if we're not just starting out, but sometimes when you're in that dynamic of boss to team member or boss to employee or whatever, like you're feeling like you just have to kind of say yes and do it, but don't be afraid to double click in or ask for clarifying questions, because a lot of times maybe your definition of blowing that out of the water is completely different, and then you've done all that work and it actually didn't meet your manager's standards. So I think it's just advocating for yourself, writing all of your wins down, making sure that you're reflecting as often as you can, and making sure that the people who have the power in the room to get you what you want, they're seeing you. That whether it's in a Slack recap that you send out every single week, or maybe it's a newsletter that you kind of put together, or maybe it's just how you present to your team or present for yourself. Like you're always making sure that the points that the value, the achievements.
I think we've given people a lot of background on like early days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to like maybe dive in a little bit more to like Badasses in Tech kind of development, how we, what the light bulb moment was, and then kind of what our journey was like producing the first few episodes.
Well, I'll share what I remember of it, and I think the partnering together on creating badasses in tech, I think looking back is maybe what blossomed our friendship into more of a like partner in all ways of the definition. I'm starting to blush now. But no, just going back, thinking about what we were talking about of, wow, we're so young and we're hearing all of these great pieces of advice. We don't want to gatekeep this. If only we could hear this when we were in college, or if only, my cousins or my family members could hear this stuff. So my memory of it, we were watching some sporting event out at some bar in San Francisco with a group of friends. And I think we just were like, oh, because of your interest in video, you were like, what if we did a video podcast?
Yeah.
And at the time, I don't think video podcast was even a thing. Of course, there were podcasts.
Yeah.
But I don't know if people were doing video. Either way.
It was less popular, but podcasts have been around forever.
Forever, yeah.
The video component was interesting and remote produced.
Yeah.
Long form.
And we were just kind of shooting the shit over a couple of beers, obviously not paying any attention to the sporting event that was on. And we were just so excited. I remember the energy of like, oh yeah, wow, that's a great idea. Oh, what if we did something similar to what we're doing for work, and we just interview all of these people in tech and help the world better understand all of the different career paths within this industry.
Right.
From communications to developers to we even had creatives from Disney and pilots and complete entrepreneurs creating
You're talking about Richard Brown, Ace Gravity, Iron Man suit.
Yeah, completely making just, I don't even know what sector of tech that falls in. Manufacturing,
invention, aviation, probably.
There you go. So, and I think the name came pretty quickly. We were just like, oh, badasses in tech.
Well, I think we worked with a lot of other badasses, and I was not expecting to get like so caught up on like old places we worked or whatever. But I think another thing that made us develop our skill sets rapidly was just working with a lot of badasses and just seeing people that like were really good at their job.
And I think that, yes, absolutely. So we can make that a learning of surround yourself with people that have the same kind of work ethic, that want the same thing. I'm so blessed and I'm so grateful for the time that we had in San Francisco, because especially growing up in a beach town in North Carolina, everything's very lax. You've seen it. Everything shuts down at like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. Like, to go from an environment like that to never ending, you're working as hard as you possibly can, but it's fun because everyone around you is doing really awesome things. So I kind of forget, I take that experience for granted. And you're so right. Making sure that you're surrounding yourself with badasses or people that want to do good things, that's just as important as any skill or technical knowledge, I would think. Having that network.
Yeah, absolutely. Networking's super important. And the opportunities that have come from creating the podcast. So, there's no fee to be on our show as a guest. But sometimes, just naturally it has opened doors to other conversations. There's been guests on that have become clients of ours. So we've been very grateful for that too. But that was never the main purpose. It was for knowledge sharing and trying to help people. And we, at that time, I wasn't running a business. I was very much working full time at another place. So the direction that we've decided to take things in recent years has been to make it more formally an extension of Growth Stack Media as a business function. And just kind of integrate things a little bit more.
I think what you're bringing up is kind of reminding me of a podcast episode we had, which was all about trusting the journey and trusting the process. And we had no idea that this, I would say, kind of like hobby project, right? At the time when we started the podcast, like you said, it wasn't necessarily something that that our goal was to make money off of it. It was something that we wanted to do for fun. It was something that we wanted to do to put ourselves up ahead of maybe our competition, so to speak, other PR people.
Personal branding.
Personal branding.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think what you're saying is very interesting for those listening. You don't know what your journey is going to bring you, and if it doesn't instantly reflect in dollars, don't shy away from doing it.
I love that.
You know?
Mm-hmm. And the more clearly you define your goals, the easier this is. But don't resist doing things essential that need to be done that maybe aren't your favorite to do or require you to learn new skill sets, which could be very draining, in order to get to where you want to be. I think people people think of ideas all the time, and I know as a creative, like how fixated and tempting it can be to get attached to one creative idea and go down a rabbit hole. But there needs to be a little bit more organization, I think, generally around the way that creative ideas are captured, categorized, organized, acted upon. And then also for creatives out there listening, like learning the business side of the creative industry is pivotal, because including myself at different times, but I know many people who are creatives, artists, etc., that have struggled financially. And I think outside of this industry, a lot of people are struggling financially. But the point I'm trying to make is that while it's important to be the best at whatever your skill sets are, technical or otherwise, you also have to learn these other essential business skills in order to make it sustainable.
Yeah.
And that means learning and doing a lot of things that maybe are outside of your wheelhouse or you're not comfortable doing, or feel like they're taking you away from what you really want to be doing. But again, like plopping whatever that long-term goal is down somewhere and having that clear vision will allow you to be more adaptable in the moment as you're hit with different obstacles and circumstances.
Yeah. I remember you kind of along your journey, there were some of those moments where you were kind of saying like, oh, I feel like I'm digging a hole in the wrong place, but having to go through that experience, you were able to get something out of it, right? You found value in that, and it kind of led you to.
You have to.
Yeah.
You have to figure out how to, even if something doesn't go your way or it actually just goes to shit, like at least find the lesson in that, and then don't do that again.
They might hear that and think about having a growth mindset. And I think that's something that you and I probably have to a fault. Like, we are not afraid to fail. We will try anything. And it's never a failure. It's an opportunity to learn. That's another episode that I'm thinking about. John Barton, who was a pilot at a very well-known airline. His whole premise, his whole episode was always stay learning, and he is right now retired and still learning right now, he's kind of learning the skill of music and, all these other things. So to your point earlier about the long-term approach, our lives hopefully are going to be very, very long and fruitful. And I think sometimes we get so kind of focused on the short term that we forget we're going to have the rest of our lives to learn and to do really awesome things. So
absolutely. I think a good point you're bringing up is like knowing how to leverage the resources around you. And I think that's why we work so well together, because what you're mentioning is like, hey, you didn't have formal training at being a podcast host, but you've always been an amazing and authentic communicator that cares about people. And where you are getting, where my skill set came in was like the actual production editing side of things. So like I was very much behind the scenes and helping things sound professional and giving you feedback on, hey, let's retake that intro and like maybe here's how you could say it or emphasize certain parts. And I think just through repetition, you will improve.
yeah.
I think from a production standpoint, especially the remote stuff we were doing initially, like it's completely changed. And a side note, like pretty much all the creative editing I do is in the Adobe suite. I've been working in it for about 17 years. And even that program itself has evolved so much. But just like when you have access to other people, allow them to, fill in the gaps. You don't have to do everything yourself. And it feels like you do, especially in the beginning or if you're trying to do something new. But even just having the ability to clearly articulate to someone like where you need help and the tactical aspects of that, I think goes a long way.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this because this is kind of a lesson in communication, right? And a lesson in um, teamwork.
Yeah.
I agree. And thank you, by the way, for saying everything that you're saying. But I do agree that we work very, very well together. And while we have similar interests and similar skills, we are very different.
Hmm.
And your skill set and my skill set, they are very different. We think about things differently. And I remember whether it was kind of those agency teams or even during my in-house career, you're interacting with people who are either very much like you or very, very different. And you want to try to figure out how to, as your own person, um, figure out how that person's maybe differences can complement yours. How can we, knowing that we have different things that we're thinking about or different skill sets, how can we work together to make them aligned instead of, because I mean, this happens a lot, unfortunately, um, seeing that somebody thinks about something differently than you or does something different and immediately thinking, well, that person is wrong. Because then you're like, you're having that very contentious relationship. Everyone knows, like, people can just tell whether you're into what the person is doing or like if you're not a fan.
I don't think I had here's my hot take.
Oh, hot take.
I disagree.
Oh, I love it.
Respectfully, I don't think everyone has. I think that's a skill. I think people with high EQ
Mm,
have that ability, but I don't think it's clear. Like, I think people miss the cues. And for example, like if you're a very extroverted, like boisterous person and you're interacting with someone who's a little bit more reserved and introverted, you may want to consider adjusting your
exactly.
communication style because that might be very off-putting to them, make them feel uncomfortable, or just understanding how other people work.
Absolutely.
It's not all, and I don't think it. I think that you, especially, are very intuitive and are good at doing that. But that's a skill set that is cultivated.
And I think that's partly why we're trying to share these lessons that we've had to kind of go through the trials and and the tribulations to learn what we're learning. But at the end of the day, what we kind of said at the beginning is we're all experts in something. We're going to be nervous at the start. Figure out a way to be comfortable with getting uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And like you're saying, just have that goal, have that roadmap, have that vision, continue to check in with it. Where are you now versus where you want to be? And I think we're kind of coming into maybe the other half of our conversation, which is a little bit about how you have grown in your entrepreneurial journey.
Right.
You've had Growth Stack Media now. I don't want to guess how many years.
2019, so almost 6 years.
And for those that are maybe considering doing their own kind of venture, or maybe they have that entrepreneurial spirit, tell us a little bit about like starting a business from scratch and how that process
Yeah.
is.
Um, yeah, it's very intimidating, coming from a school of communication background. I didn't have a lot of formal financial literacy education or, really understanding the tax implications of starting it. Like those are all things I had to learn. So that kind of goes back to like you said, being comfortable with being uncomfortable and like just the growth mindset and know that there's going to be things that many things that you're going to have to learn that are outside your comfort zone or your wheelhouse. So essentially, we had this entity on paper to pay my brother for a shoot for the day to help as a cameraman. And then it sat there. I'm still very much working full time at an agency and wasn't in a position to go out on my own yet. But was still even back then so clearly communicating the vision to like pretty excitingly like where we're at today. You know, I remember having conversations with you and we were living out in Oakland, like chilling on the rooftop and just me being like, no, like you don't, you know, people don't understand it.
Get this. I was
No
like,
one
I
was
don't
getting it. I
understand.
was, you know, I was saying, look, like, yes, it is PR, it is editorial, but like that can be a script. We can start with video and transcribe it and get the editorial stuff we need. Like if we lead with video, we can get so many other assets. And it's just like, it was so clear in my mind, but it wasn't clear to everyone else how they were going to make it profitable and make a business out of it.
Right.
So it really had to come opportunistically. And once the LLC was officially formed and everything, I had a former client from when I was working full time at the other agency who had since moved on to a different company, a cybersecurity startup, and focused on authentication. And he reached out back to me and was a mentor of mine and said, hey, like, you know, I'm in this new role at this company. I want to work with you.
Yeah.
And luckily I had a few of those line up around the same time where clearly my attention was getting pulled into, I don't want to just do 9 to 5 PR only anymore. I want to do this more integrated approach that involves video, involves podcasting, and really make a go of this. And so that was like October 2019, and then COVID happened. But I just got scrappy. You know, I was already in that mindset and already a solopreneur at that time, like trying to land clients, had my first few, had some retainers. So it gave me a stability enough to get through that tough time period. But one of the business implications I didn't expect there was two significant ones that the pandemic actually opened up in a positive way, which even seems like kind of cringe to say. The first is the validity of remote production. So whereas before the brands are hesitating to leverage remotely produced video because they're worried about the quality and how it's going to be received from a brand reputation standpoint, I saw that shift almost immediately. And where before that, it was harder to make that case. If they did want to shoot, they want to do on location. It just looks better. But it started to have more of a place for external use. All of a sudden, you're seeing on news programs, they're interviewing talking heads that are remote. So when I got to the point where I'm like, okay, there's talking heads on CBS and CNN or Fox, like this is officially a valid medium.
Like people in their bedrooms.
They're doing it. Yeah. They're doing it. And it's like, are we going to get ahead of the ball or are we just going to let it pass us by? And a benefit of that, not only of being accepted, but when you're producing things remotely, the budgets can be more affordable.
Yeah.
Meaning like you can get a higher volume of content, I would say. In most scenarios, I don't want to say every scenario, because for example, like, you know, you could do it on a single location shoot and, you know, batch all your content for the year. And maybe that it shakes out to be whatever else.
Right.
But outside of like people accepting it and the cost aspect of things, offices were empty. So it was a great time to, with safety parameters in place and testing, to make sure everyone was healthy and good to go, that you could actually take advantage of a lot of unoccupied office space to produce on-location content.
And it sounds like you had maybe the vision that we've been talking about of this video agency, and maybe because of the way that the world was going, where the direction that everything was going, it sounded like you had to maybe pivot your goals and kind of pivot your maybe offerings based on what was happening at that time. So I'm curious, maybe for listeners who they're feeling like they're kind of in a position where they need to pivot, what does a pivot feel like? Like, how do you know when you need to maybe pivot?
Yeah.
And then how do you go about that?
I think you feel it. You feel it, or it's a very, you know, straightforward circumstance. It's
what does it feel like?
Like things are off, or the things that you were doing that were working at one time need to be adjusted in order for them to keep working, or maybe they're not working at all anymore.
That is a really, again, going back to what we were talking about of just having awareness.
Yeah.
I think that is so important. And we don't listen to our bodies enough, I don't think. So the fact that what I'm hearing you say is that you've had a physical, kind of like a visceral gut feeling.
Yeah.
And I can relate to that as well. What you said about if it once was working and something kind of feels off now, like I think that is something that we should all kind of keep in mind, whether it's from a career perspective or personal perspective. Because I felt kind of similar things too. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're pivoting from something bad or something terrible. I think it's just part of growth.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like almost just like a strategic board game. It's like you have to kind of think a few moves ahead.
Mm.
And when I say pivot, it doesn't necessarily mean like give up on your end goal or your end dreams, but like maybe pivot on what you're focusing on in the short term so you could survive as a business. So maybe that means like, hey, like for a little bit period of time, like maybe I was doing a little bit less video, but it was so I could, at the time as a solopreneur, deliver above and beyond results from a media relations perspective for a PR client, knowing that that was going to sustain me for 3 to 5 months to allow me to keep pursuing and building the agency, which ultimately my personal end goal, which I don't know if I've vocalized this clearly, is like my end goal is to, first of all, run a video forward integrated communication and content agency. We specialize in PR, video production, and podcasting. It all comes back to digital storytelling. But growing up and trying to pursue the industry from a young age and other ways and getting rejected early on, but also like learning the skill sets through news. Like even back in high school, I did, that was my first foray. I was in the news. I had news as like a class. We had like a local station. Yeah, I did like the morning announcements, but you learn each stage of what goes into it. And then also like Adobe Premiere, which was like a huge big deal. My end goal is I want us to be in a position where not only are we doing great work for our clients, but that there's no more barriers to go out there and create the cool content that we want. We earlier in our conversation, we were talking about like a lot of creativity sometimes ends up being stifled because when you're in an agency or in-house environment that isn't a company that you're owning or running, there has to be provable ROI. A lot of times you're getting very short periods of time to prove that ROI. So what you can do and justifying why you're going to do it has to have some short-term financial return on it. But that, again, stifles creativity. And I think that being able to be in a position like even now, what we're doing, to say, okay, cool, we have a sustainable business, but like this is the content that we're passionate about that we want to put out there in the world. Like that's so cool. Like now we can just go out and create it. We're not having to get permission from a manager or have to just put it all off,
What would you say are some of the challenges of being your own boss? Because it sounds like very glamorous, right? But like, what are some of, maybe it isn't for everybody. Like,
I don't think it is.
Yeah.
I think there's a sense of autonomy and agency, in the sense of agency over your own life and independence and feeling like, I am ultimately the buck stops with me in terms of responsibility. If something good happens, it falls on me. But if something bad happens, it's my fault too. The dark side of those things are, especially in the early days, like not knowing what's going to happen. Especially, like you're trying to grow the business, get new clients. Is that deal going to close? What does it mean for the business if it does? What does it mean if it doesn't? And not being discouraged. And then also like just the sheer volume of tasks that need to be completed to stay on task, especially in the early days when you're doing like things mainly on your own. It's completely overwhelming, and it's like kind of like a dark mental space to be in. But the light at the end of the tunnel with that is achieving a stable business. And like I said earlier, like we're completely bootstrapped. Like we've taken our skill sets with no outside investment, and through the value we've created for our clients, been able to build our own business. We don't have any venture backing. We've done that ourselves, and that's a lot of good that comes from that because we ultimately can steer the direction of it. At other times, I think it's stifled our growth when maybe we knew, maybe even from like a marketing budget perspective or paying for ads to acquire new leads, like you have to make tough choices. You
Right.
have to do, but it goes back to what you were saying earlier, which is like have your vision, have the goal, but then like sometimes you have to pivot. Sometimes you just have to do the best with what you have.
Yeah.
And be relentless at prioritizing, I would say.
And you should be very proud of yourself. I know I'm very proud of you. I've had a front row seat watching you just on your journey and grow, literally create Growth Stack Media. And yes, you've done it. I would say you definitely have done it by yourself. But again, going back to the whole kind of team player approach, you knew exactly when you needed help and you knew exactly the type of help that you needed. And so you have created a really great team. And I think that's probably a great lesson to share as well of like when to know
Yeah.
to bring in help.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it. Well, my easy answer to that is that you're gonna need help a lot earlier on in a bootstrap business than you can probably afford to hire. So what that becomes is then, okay, well, how can I outsource maybe some of this aspect of the work in an affordable way? But really, the budget is when I think it's the right time. There's always more that can be done. That's where I think like relentless tracking and like knowing which ideas that come to mind have some type of like actual real value that need to be actioned on, but maybe at a later time, and like categorizing them in a way that that okay, now we just closed 2 new clients. That means we have X amount of budget to reinvest into the business in this department. Like now we're going to go out and hire like someone, or work with another intern and have them help with podcast outreach, or you have to clearly define what are the problems that, or even like the pitfalls that keep happening in the business that are creating friction that you wish uh, that you already had a solution for in the short term, but you just maybe either don't have the financial resources to solve that problem yet, or you have too much other stuff that you need to prioritize. For us in a client services business, it's like the client work always comes first. Outside, but then there's also, the operations of actually running an agency and growing the brand of our agency. And that's where podcasting helps. But it's just a lot. It's, you're always going to need help. And when you can afford to get the help, like just get it.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying about the continuously, like relentlessly tracking things, that brings to mind for me are kind of work back plans. Like, and I've done an episode all about work back plans because of how important the tracking and the reflecting and the planning is. So yeah, I think having a work back plan too, something as simple as, well, I say something as simple, but there's so much more involved. But maybe a lot of companies out there, a lot of executives out there might think launching a product is simple. That's a simple thing. We're just going to launch a product, or we're going to make an announcement about upcoming funding. But there is so many elements, and each of those elements deserve their own kind of work back plan. What you were saying a second ago about like knowing exactly what needs to be done, and that way you can outsource. I think that's really helpful too. Like the more that you can operationalize things, the more that you can understand, okay, what 5 to 6 ingredients goes into this project. And especially if it's something that I'm going to be doing multiple times, might as well kind of systematize it. And that way you can have everything kind of in place at the ready.
Yeah. So how do you implement that? Like if we're doing an intake or we're onboarding a new client, how do you bring that to the table?
The work back plan?
The work back plan, and just like, yeah, what's your process?
Well, funny you ask. I would say, what we're doing with our clients now is really helping them become leaders in their space. So there's a few things that we kind of specialize in doing, whether it's pure kind of announcements. So what we were just talking about, let's call that like media relations, right? Then there's also helping our executives formulate their thoughts into really compelling, bold, what we call thought leadership. So I think, whether it's the announcement or whether it's helping, our executives say really awesome things, so much so that reporters want to write about them or feature them. It's really just starting from that go live rate. And if there isn't one, make one.
So how do you bridge though? Like obviously, like a lot of the clients that we work with are in like the tech space, and they're very technical,
Yeah.
or they're engineers or developers that are so close to the product that they know every in and out, exactly how it works. What tactics do you use to monitor the media and figure out like what thought leadership pillars to develop and how to map back like their business goals to what the media is going to care about?
Well, I will answer in a different way.
Okay.
I think when you and I are working with our clients, and especially right now in tech, there's so many AI specific companies, but all of them do different things. There's so many security specific companies, but all of them do different things. And I think number one is just identifying what is their unique story beyond the product. Like, what challenge is this company or are these individuals trying to solve? I guarantee you they created this concept, this business, this product, because they were dealing with something. There was a gap. There was something that was not there that needed to be there to help them get their job done, etc. So a lot of the times when we're talking with our founders or our CEOs, like we're really trying to get the nitty-gritty out of what problem is this solving?
Right. From the from the consumer perspective.
Yeah.
Or like the customer perspective.
Exactly. Like what, yes, exactly. And I think from there, this is what I love about PR is it's a big puzzle. There, like we said at the beginning of all of this, everyone has a story to tell. It's just about finding the story. So if there's kind of an emotional play to the reason why somebody created a product. One of our badasses in tech guests, one of our recent ones, he created a video game, all based on his kind of his experiences. Not being able to be a successful drummer, right? So he had that wonderful story about how he was almost like borderline depressed. Like he was getting so discouraged that he wasn't able to fulfill his career in drumming, but he was able to kind of find his own way in developing and kind of taking his passion from music and learning you would know this more than me, like the technical side of the sound engineering, all of that. And that helped him create this brand new game. It's like an AI game where you can interact with AI players. And that kind of helped him with his depression.
So what you're getting at is like that's what we would call like founder story. So like founder story is an angle that like media are interested in that might want to do more of like the background of who the founding team is and how they, started the company. That's an angle. But I also think there's other research involved with what we do where, we not only look at their competitors, but just monitor the industry very closely and see, what are the topics that are coming up regularly or semi-regularly, and how can we help shape these narratives to make them relevant in those lanes?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we talk about this a lot. We technically have two clients, right? It's our client, like the company that we're working for,
Right.
and then it's the media, it's the journalist, so we are trying every single day to strike that balance of giving our media stakeholders what they need, what they want, that's a story that you and I would want to read, a consumer, a regular Joe. I will say, with all of that being said, of course, there are moments and there will be times where you want to get your news or your thoughts or your initiatives directly in front of specific audiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, you and I have kind of counseled a lot of our clients around maybe that flashy Today Show piece or that Wall Street Journal interview or that big kahuna feature that everyone is clamoring for. Maybe that actually isn't in where your audience is consuming news.
And maybe the client isn't ready. Like maybe the elements of the story aren't even there to get that high of a placement, even though that's like what they want. And I think that's where some of the other counsel comes in of just like, you have to set expectations. I think it's important to be ambitious, but you have to also know, like, either through an existing relationship with the journalist or just knowing what goes into it. So now we're, especially we're talking about like top tier business press.
Right.
All the elements have to be there. There's no shortcuts to it. You're just not going to get the result.
Absolutely. And you don't want to go there too quickly and risk your brand, especially as we're talking about some of the conversations in tech right now, AI. There are so many different camps. There's the camp of AI is going to take over our jobs, right? And then there's the camp of, no, it's going to help and humans will always be at the center.
Yeah.
Then there's the camp of, this is all just hype, right? So,
and then there's the security angle.
Of course.
Yeah.
So as with our skills as storytellers and the eye that we have, we're really trying to guide our clients. So I'll put an example to kind of help articulate that. Again, everyone is always, we need Wall Street Journal, we need New York Times, we need this, we need that. But maybe that newsletter or that Substack, that 250,000 people read, it's all HR specific people. It's all hiring leaders, founder CEOs, and you're selling the best, next greatest thing for HR, services and tools.
Yeah.
You might want to prioritize that newsletter that's getting all of those eyeballs that are 100% relevant to you versus skipping over that entirely and going straight for maybe what just sounds good.
So how have you seen the media landscape change and how has that inevitably impacted PR? Because you're talking about Substack and newsletters. Not everyone might know about Substack. Newsletters have been around from, and usually like email marketing perspective, but they're certainly growing in popularity and as a viable like medium more for PR. How else have you seen the landscape change?
More touch points are required for brand awareness, public relations. So what I mean by that, it is no longer enough to just get that print hit or that, what we keep saying, that traditional hit. Now you need to have something on social, right? So I'll think about something that we just recently did for a client. Again, we're talking about making sure that any idea or any story that is worth attention telling, that we are encouraging our clients to tell it in one way, shape, or form. Today, there's this beautiful thing, social media, LinkedIn in particular. A lot of media and journalists, they're looking on LinkedIn specifically for resources or story ideas. It's really important. I've seen a lot of success in, if you are consistently posting on LinkedIn twice a week is what they say, twice a week, consistently posting, there is a huge chance that social media post will get someone's attention, whether it's an influencer or a journalist. And that kind of, that awareness will then open up an opportunity for, hey, I saw those thoughts on LinkedIn. I would love for you to write a full op-ed. I love that kind of 2-sentence that you put in LinkedIn that was really helpful. I'm the editor, I'm coming to you. Not all publications operate in this way, but a lot, again, because of the constraints that newsrooms are feeling,
Yeah.
a lot of the times editors are now picking what they want to be written about, meaning it's harder to just kind of pitch editors op-ed topics. You can still do that, definitely, but the shifts now, it's making it much harder to just get those placements out of nowhere without doing some extra upfront. So that social media post will then turn into an op-ed.
Mhm.
That op-ed might open doors for a podcast interview. That
Yeah.
podcast interview could then open doors for a speaking engagement.
Yes.
That speaking engagement, now you're going back to the audience, kind of the importance of knowing your audience and wanting to get your messages in front of the most relevant, not just any person willing to listen.
The one thing I want to say is, like, you're bringing up a really unique and interesting point I don't think is talked about a lot, where a lot of times for social media, like, we're thinking of that through the lens of primarily like a content distribution channel. Like, we have our final asset, we know what we want to promote specifically, and we're putting that out there like a final op-ed. That's an obvious one. But what you're bringing up is that it's also kind of turning more into a testing ground of ideas to see if other people are interested, and also to get a pulse on, like, what are experts in the community talking about, and what's your place in it, is or even having a reaction to another news article, and like maybe you provide some thoughts on it on your own LinkedIn, and then you're saying, wow, like, I had a hot take on this policy article that happened, and clearly people are interested about this. Now we can, develop this out into a pitch, maybe get an op-ed out of it, and then the trickle effect. And it's been really amazing to see. We've implemented that in our own business, and it has led to, went from commenting on a news article about content moderation between TikTok and Adobe to multiple op-eds on media literacy, to having an inbound request to connect with the executive director of the largest media literacy organization,
Exactly.
to producing a video series for them.
Yeah,
It all just comes back like it's just like a full circle thing.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'll just add to that, if you're a CEO or if you're a founder, don't post, because LinkedIn is not just it's not just what am I trying to say? Like an amplification. It's
Right.
not just a megaphone.
No.
It's not just a megaphone. It's there for conversation. It's there to share stories. It's there to help and to teach. So I see a lot of really successful posts that are founders just kind of updating the community about how they're like what their business is up to these days. Having to deal with imposter syndrome, and their CEOs kind of posting about this. So I think, again, like, where is the industry kind of shifting? Where are things kind of moving and going? It's no longer just on, your comms team to go after and get that one hit. It's really making sure that there's an integrated approach to all things, and that you have to have a little bit of stake in the game too.
Yeah, I think something you're hitting on too that needs to be talked about is like how to prove the value of PR in different ways. And like what you're bringing up is that there's different use cases for publication, and it's not just about the audience size. Like there's different uses, right? So it's not necessarily like you get the Wall Street Journal hit and then all of a sudden you're getting a bunch of signups for your SaaS product.
Mostly not.
But that same article would be helpful in an offline conversation with an investor or a customer.
Yep.
The sales team has a prospect that's on the fence, and then they're able to send that hit over, or they're in the process of wanting to fundraise.
Absolutely.
They can take that to an investor, and that might carry a little bit more weight for like longer term business goals than something like you're bringing up, which is like targeting maybe trade press, which is when I think of the Substacks or like the newsletters, or some of these maybe essential publications in the industry that might not have as big of like a monthly like audience size, might actually move the needle more in the short term if that's what the goal is. So
1,000%.
it's not just simply you're getting PR coverage hits and like how many people are listening to the podcast, how many people saw it, or it's not just like impressions.
Right.
But I think, and we had this conversation a little bit earlier too before we were rolling, but like I think there's a lot more opportunity to educate clients on how the work we do impacts not only the communication and marketing department, but other departments of the business.
Absolutely.
And how PR is essentially the backbone of the messaging that is going to impact how assets and other content are created across departmentally for a handful of different use cases. And it's while the majority of it is top of the funnel type stuff, the right kind of technical PR coverage or podcast discussions could be leveraged in a more of like mid-funnel, bottom funnel stage to actually convert a sale or secure funding.
Exactly. Like you have to know how to take that piece of coverage and make sure that there's somebody there that's communicating and putting it on the customer success team and say, hey, we got this hit. Let's do something with it internally, right? Or let's make sure that the customer that we're trying to upsell, but they won't do it until we get this feature placed or whatever. Okay, our CEO just talked about this feature in this podcast. Let's go ahead and make sure that customer is getting it. And that's where the PR person, they can't do that.
A lot of times we don't have visibility.
We don't have visibility into that.
And so why is that important to get more ingrained with your clients, businesses outside of just whoever like the communication or marketing contact is?
Well, and I think that's where you and we're trying to take Growth Stack Media is really like, we want to be a sticky part of those teams. And I think based on the skills and experiences that you have with video and writing and public relations and all of that, plus what I've been able to kind of learn in-house, I feel like there's some really great we're a really great package deal, if you ask me, because we know exactly. Thank you. We know exactly, like, okay, so this hit. Let's make sure that the social person is on top of making the nice social post.
Coordinated, yeah.
Again, like who's on the sales team that needs to see this? Here's a fun fact, or like my favorite thing, and I'm sure you'll be able to riff on it a little bit because there's the video component. No one talks enough about how PR helps the employee morale and just like internal communications. So whether it's, we just got this award, this industry award. Now, how are your employees going to feel? Probably amped because they're now working for a
best places to work.
Exactly.
Most innovative.
Exactly. And so, if you're not prioritizing those things, consider it, because it really does do a lot for your business, both from an ROI perspective, a customer perspective, and just like employee morale. People love to work at a place that is getting celebrated. Bonus if you can figure out how to spotlight those individuals, which I know is something that you do a really great job of with the video work that we help our clients out with.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And well, I don't want to say video is my favorite part, and like on location video production days are among my favorite working like environments to be in. I just love the energy of being on a set. But I equally love PR too. What are you getting most excited about? Like what's coming down the pike that you're getting excited about?
Well, we have been working together officially for about a year now, and I'm just really happy with how things have been going this year. I feel like for me, I had no idea how to do like running my own kind of agency. You know what I mean? I was always that PR practitioner or the PR director within an organization or a team. So it's been a lot of fun working alongside of you in this entrepreneurial capacity. So what I'm looking forward to is just continuing to grow the business with you and continuing to make sure that we're on top of everything that needs to be done with all things integrated comms. Because I know you and I, that's where we believe things are going in the future, both from our clients, but then also for folks listening who might want to pursue a career in comms or video or PR or social media or internal comms or ghostwriting or events, like
There's so many
anything.
directions to take it.
Yeah, and just to kind of put an end on my point, it's even if you think that you want to have a career in a specific discipline of marketing, of engineering, of product development, of HR, like you are going to be interacting with another department or another subset of that discipline. So you might as well try to learn a little bit about it, integrate it.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're seeing is happening, at least from our perspective. Like, again, if you are really interested in coordinating events, well, you better make sure that there's some sort of video component at your booth, or that you can go to this event and make sure that your speaker has some sort of award that they've won.
Or news to announce. So if there's, if you have an events budget, for example, and here are the top 5 or 10 events we're going to have a presence at, have a conversation with product marketing and look at the roadmap and say, okay, are there any big releases that we can ship that line up with this timing? Because oftentimes at these events, there's press there. So I think what you're bringing up is more coordination, more integration, and being open-minded to understanding other people's jobs, functions that maybe we're not doing on a day-to-day in-house, but still being friendly with them and understanding how to make them successful.
Badasses in Tech is brought to you by Growth Stack Media, an integrated communication and content agency. If you're looking to scale your business affordably through public relations, video production, or podcasting, we've got you covered. Visit growthstackmedia.com to get in touch today.